Well, that was a sudden stop of the music. I am just going to hopefully see Matt as well come on with his camera, and hopefully you can see mine. Hello again, Matt.
Hello.
Long time no see. Well, was it 4 hours ago? So nice to see you again. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are going to be kind of following on the theme around using cloud workflow, specifically G Suite on iPad this afternoon. I guess it's a little bit about dispelling some of the myths that we know about, and also just have a very frank conversation and to talk about the great things around G Suite and iPad. A huge welcome to the wider academia family. So we've got, I know, old customers or existing customers, I should say, and new customers. And we are joined in the background by Caris, who's doing all the bits behind the scenes. And we have also Matt Pullen, young Jedi of iPad. Only because Greg uses Yoda. Matt, you are a senior lecturer at the University of South Wales. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
No, well, that an Apple Professional Learning Specialist, and I'm sure you're going to do the badge gag at some point, so I'll leave that to you.
What do you mean? That you're also a specialist for Microsoft and also for Google, and you do collect badges with your enormous head on your emoji that you have there?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So really important. Matt absolutely is not only in the education space, working on the front line, also an Apple Professional Learning Specialist, but also very knowledgeable from the Google perspective and also Microsoft perspective. So totally gets the workflow in the cloud. And Matt and I do a lot of work together, supporting leadership teams, teachers, and lots of other people as well. And I am Tom Abel Green, also known as Tag, very long surname. That is also an old gag. Currently just have a slight change in role, but working very much across education and the modern workplace field. So, Matt, we've been going on about this internally with us, I guess you and me, talking about the powers of creativity through the use of iPad, but also making use of best practice. And sometimes that absolutely does include apps from other manufacturers or vendors. So in this case, Google, we did a piece this morning, Office 365. So this kind of follows on. And I think the reality is we talk a lot to leadership teams who are probably under the impression that they have to use a certain device with a certain platform, and they can't stray away from that. And actually what we're trying to say is that isn't always the case, and actually things can be mixed up, and that we should probably address some of these things.
Yeah, I think we said this morning, didn't we, when we were talking about the Office 365 piece, that there's the backbone to how you work, and then there's the creativity in the classroom with your students that might be a slightly different angle. And if your admin and infrastructure runs off of Google Suite, then that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't use other devices really to make that work. And that's what we're really going to sort of talk about throughout the session today is that mixture between admin and teaching and learning.
Yep. And these myths on the screen, by the way, are not set in stone in terms of these are the only things. These are just the ones we come up often against, or they're just concerns, right? And we validate those concerns because actually we'd rather address them than not address them. But I use Gmail, therefore can't use it on my iPad because iPad is Apple and not Google. What do you think to that?
It's one of those things, isn't it? It's like it kind of because Google make both devices and the platform. It's like in the past, I suppose, with Microsoft, and you buy a PC and it comes with Microsoft software on it, and that's what you get. I think the world has moved on maybe last 10, 15, 20 years or so to those things, even in their own marketing departments are separate entities now. You have your hardware and the software.
Yeah.
And I think when you appreciate them in that way, and we'll talk about this as later slides kind of proves, that there's an awful lot of applications made by Google for an iPad. So
there are, and I will actually come on to that. And I think what we'll do is we'll kind of go through kind of very brief slide deck, just to kind of look at some of the apps in a little bit of detail and just talk about those. But absolutely, the gem of today, the cornerstone of today's webinar is your live demo. So, like I said this morning, if as it went as well as it did this morning, it's great. You'll get all the plaudits. If it goes wrong, it's also your fault, and we'll just sit back and watch. So, I guess the reality is, and I knew that Google made more apps for the iPad than Apple do, but actually, I didn't realise that they actually take ownership of about 50 plus apps in the App Store that are owned or driven by Google specifically. And this kind of screenshot shows the use of an iPad that actually highlights not just all the Chrome apps that this particular user uses, but also the Office apps there, and also the Apple apps that are there. And I think that's really important to see that blend as well, that it can be there. But 50 apps and counting, that's incredible. I think the reality is there's a core set that are used as a workflow perspective, and certainly in the education space, we absolutely know that Mail, Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, and Google Classroom are instrumental. They're different, right? In terms of they're Google owned, they work slightly differently, but ultimately they're the same as the apps that come pre-built into iPad. So in this instance, Mail, the Files app, which again I know we'll deep dive into, Pages, which is the equivalent of Word. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Numbers, and then a Keynote, and we've got Classroom, Apple Classroom, but there is a difference to those two. I think schoolwork is probably more akin now to what Google Classroom offers. But the reality is it fits in really well. I don't think there's anything else you want to this bit, was there, or is it just kind of a shut up and move on?
I think it was just as we sort of mentioned earlier. There's the element of the admin kind of level of how do the reception team, how does the admin team work, how do teachers work between teachers, and that could be that they're utilizing Google Suite in order for that collaborative kind of approach for keeping track of numbers, data spreadsheets, whatever. But then there, like we said, and we'll talk about this more in the demo, that teaching and learning aspect, that once it's on the device, what can the students do with it then that might be slightly different? And we will keep talking about it because we talk about it on every webinar, the future of jobs, the creativity need for students, the ability for them to be adaptable and to understand the range of applications from a digital literacy point of view, and the importance of choice for students to work in a way that works for them. Ultimately, we want them to demonstrate their learning. We don't necessarily want them to demonstrate their ability to use Google Docs or or a single app. That's not the purpose of education. So,
and I think there's a couple of points there to highlight. Is there's not just one specific app, and I think what we often see is, I need an app for this, or I need an app for maths or science and everything else. Actually, it's about the workflow and how students can showcase how they get to an end result. And feedback is really important, actually, more than ever. I think I talked about this not just this morning, but in other webinars over the last few months, is the importance of being able to guide students down that learning path. And I guess the talk of remote learning, blended learning, and certainly September, whilst we're seeing a bit of an uplift in what it might look like, the reality is we're going back to not even a new normal, a new abnormal. And I guess the only positive that's come from COVID in any way, shape, or form has been around the the ability for us to change some of the way the education sector sits. So really important. And Karis has actually mentioned, by the way, that if you've got visibility of the chat feature, please absolutely do ask any questions. We'll try and answer them as we go along. And if not, we'll certainly come back to them at the end. And actually, we do like that engagement from you as an audience. So please do join us. So I guess the first one is the Google Docs thing. It's an interesting one because Google Docs is hugely powerful. Google is very well known for its collaboration skills across all of their suite, which is fantastic. User logs in, has access to everything that's in the cloud. I think I know you and I, when we were planning this, we were talking about when we look at cloud computing, and traditionally schools have had on-site servers. So any school or any customer or user that is using Google, they're used to probably working in the cloud more so. I don't know if that's a generalization actually, but maybe more so than other users. So the understanding of where their data is already being kept and they have access to is probably, they're probably a step ahead, I guess. But yeah, access Google Docs. You can create Google Docs, access your docs.
Yeah, we spoke this morning, didn't we, with the Microsoft piece about the USB was one of the one of the myths really about the whole I've got everything on a USB stick. And when we were discussing this, I think you're exactly right. Like, I don't know how many people that have utilized Google as their backbone that don't just start off using the cloud as a system, and how many of them are saving it offline to their computer and then putting it on a USB. It's almost like 5 steps more to do something that you used to do. So
yeah,
I would assume that the cloud solution, if you are a Google school, is supported. And maybe it's slightly different myths that come up about the Chromebook, kind of approach.
And it's interesting actually, and I've done it on some of the slides. There's URLs there, and these are links directly from the Google support pages talking about using docs specifically on iPad and iOS. So there's a huge drive from Google as well. I think actually the reality is we can talk about it is Apple and more so than ever are talking around the use of Google Apps and Office apps, for example, on iPad, because it complements the bigger picture much more so. So again, we've got slides, and these are we'll dive into these a bit later on, but these are just give you some previews. But again, very much how they seem on a Chromebook or on a Chrome browser, because that's essentially what you're using. One of the things actually I didn't add was the Chrome browser into these slides, but absolutely. That's there as well. I think one of the big strengths of the Google Suite or the G Suite platform is Google Classroom, for so many reasons. The ability to create classes that then shares that documentation with students, puts it into their Google Drive, gives you the stream features. In fact, my 11-year-old, as you and I've discussed, they're a G Suite, or actually he's left. He graduated from primary school yesterday. Very weird times. So he was actually accessing G Suite at home from a schooling perspective. Even though he has access to Chromebook, he prefers using it on an iPad, and I think we'll come back to that point later on. But he was doing his meets, he was doing all of those sorts of things. So hugely powerful. Google Drive, as we talked about, and I think one of the big things around Google Drive also is the shared drives, which is hugely instrumental in education and business actually. But again, access to those, and again the link there from Google around how to on iPad. I think what's great about Google Drive, as you would do, I guess, in any of the apps on iPad, is you can create a document from the drive and saves it. And even from an iPad perspective, a really powerful one is creating a photo from, or taking a photo from Drive, so it saves it directly to Drive is really powerful. So a big success. And actually the Google Classroom piece is built on Google Drive, for those who didn't know that. Google Meet, obviously there's been a big uplift. Apologies, the URL's hidden there. I'll rectify that. But the Google Meet kind of platform has taken a bit of a bashing, absolutely, as in positive. So in terms of the uptake on it, because like Teams, and some of the other, I guess Zoom was probably the more prominent one throughout the COVID period. Google Meet has become instrumental in remote learning, just to be able to talk to students. Have you found the same for your son, for Max?
So they use Google Classroom. Well, they use kind of a mixture. When they're in school, they use Google Classroom quite a lot for sharing stuff to the teacher. They actually moved to Seesaw for home learning and sharing of information. But the great thing was, when he was in school, was he could come home and show us what he'd done, and everything was on his drive. And even now, he can look back into all of that and see all of the work that he's created. And it was just the fact that he had that opportunity to come home. We've got iPads in the house. He can jump on an iPad and carry on doing a piece of work. Once he's shown it to us, we might, give him some feedback, and then he'd get inspired to do something else, and he'd carry on working on it. And it's just that seamless kind of move from, whatever device he was using in school at the time, to come home and carry on exactly where he'd left off.
And I think we've talked about those experiences, from the kids, but we're seeing it in the schools bit as well. And I think it was a mad rush, wasn't there, very early on in COVID, and everyone was trying to get onto something. There's been a lot of support from the DFE as well around moving to an ecosystem in the cloud. And from our perspective, we know it's one of the most important pillars in a mobile technology journey. But interestingly, and again, we talked about this morning, is that there's 170,000 plus apps in the App Store for iPad, specifically aimed at education. And what we will show in the demos actually is the sharing extension feature that allows you to move between the G Suite apps as well as some of the other apps that are cross curricular or non-subject specific, if you like, that allows you to bring stuff in and out. Split screen, hugely powerful. We'll talk about all of those as well. And I guess from that bit, I guess, Matt, we're gonna dive in to the all important bit, which is about you sharing your screen. And I think what we learned this morning is we'll obviously remove our cameras. We're still here live. Oh, you've got a whiteboard, not that one.
Oh yeah, sorry, wrong button.
Not that one.
I knew that.
Yeah. So I guess, Matt, we'll just shut our cameras down, but we're live. So if there's any questions, as I said, as we go along, I think what we're going to go back to is the kind of some of the myths that we have, so that we can kind of talk those and show you live. So if you've got any live requests, please let us know. We'll try and showcase those. It is not about a full training session today. It is about just giving you some of the examples and maybe looking at some of the conversation pieces. So Matt, you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Good. All of my stuff is being saved in Drive, Google Drive.
Yeah.
I can't access it. Well, can I?
Okay. So, well, you can. So, as we've said, that there is an app for that. I think that's a great phrase. That should be used. That should be used more often. So, obviously, on my screen at the moment, you can see there is a Google Drive application, which works the same as you'll see, on any other platform. Obviously, it looks slightly different in terms of its setup, but all my folders are here. I can access everything that's in the cloud, including all of those shared folders or anything that's been shared with me. And as Tom mentioned before, the lovely plus icon here, so I can create anything and use the camera, like we said, from that direct path. The other thing kind of to highlight as well, though, is if you're like me, and I suppose a bit like you as well, Tom, we talked about this before. This application here, this is files, so this sits on the iPad. Now, it's not like Apple's version of Drive as such. It actually encompasses all of those things. So on the left hand side, that's my iCloud Drive, where I can access anything which is Apple based, but also I have my Google Drive. But also, if I have other things, like I was quite an early adopter of using the cloud for storage and use Dropbox and Box and all of those things when they first kind of came on the scene. And I've got a lot of resources in those things as well. So actually what Files offers me is that opportunity to access everything. So if I tap into Google Drive, it's exactly the same kind of setup here. And as you can see there, I've moved some things around and they've just shown up within my drive. So it keeps everything relevant and in one place for me. The other thing here is, I might be saving things from multiple different applications within my iPad. Once it's on my iPad, I mean, it just knows that it's going to open in one of those apps. So when I tap on it, in these cases, these are Google Docs and Slides files. It will just open in Slides and Docs because it knows it has to. The same as if I saved a book creator file in here, it's just going to open directly into that. So from that user experience, it actually kind of is a little bit more seamless because it's just all in one place.
So Matt, just actually a question, and this is just off the bat, so we absolutely haven't prepared for this one. If I was in a position where I had some stuff on a USB stick, could I plug the USB stick into the iPad and drag it into, because that will show up in Files, the USB stick. Can I then drag it into the Google Drive from there? Yes.
So if I show this, so because I'm connected to the screen at the moment, it's not going to let me demo this live because I'm using the connection to actually show it. But this is what it would look like on your device. So you'll see on the left hand side now I've got that extra storage underneath Google Drive. That's my external storage, so USB. And then it will show me everything that's on my device. And then if I tap on that, I get the options, but you can just drag and drop this. So you'll see a third one down is move. If I tap on that, that's going to open up the where do I want to move it to. If I choose Google Drive, I can do it there. But also because it's a touchscreen device, I can tap on that and just drag it directly onto the Google Drive application and put it in one of those folders. So it's pretty seamless, really, in terms of that. How do I utilize external storage or cloud storage? Files kind of is that place to keep it all together.
So, and really important that people are aware of that, because whilst most people using Google Drive probably won't be using a USB stick, but I know that there is a potential people moving across to that platform. And the other thing I just want to say, if it is a little bit blurry, it's a bandwidth issue. Obviously, we're straining the network here with the webinars. So hopefully it's visible enough that you can kind of get an idea. Matt, one of the one of the massive strengths of G Suite is Google Classroom. But I need my Chromebook to be able to do a classroom, do I not?
So you don't know. So again, we highlighted this before in terms of the number of apps. This is all of the Google apps that I have on my device, and that's not all of the Google apps that you can download. And you'll see, in the center there is Google Classroom, which operates, as it would do as you're used to. So all of my classes are in place, and I can set things. The other really nice thing is we've talked before about the 170,000 plus educational apps. As you can see, some of them I've got on my screen here as well, in various different forms of creativity, whatever it is you're looking at. But when you're in those apps, what Apple does nicely, if I jump into a Pages document, for example, if I tap on the 3 dots here, the more, and then tap on share, this is when it kind of just links everything together. So I have all of these different options of where to share it to, and Google Classroom will be one of those. So just in like 2 taps, if I'm working in something, I can then send it across to my Google Classroom, whatever it is. If I'm using it to create an assignment, obviously I'm logged in as a teacher, but for students being able to answer those assignments, they just do it from the application that they're creating, whatever they're creating in. And when we mentioned this earlier, that whole discussion around what it is that we want our learners to be, we want them to be adaptable, we want them to be critical thinkers and use the right tool at the right time for the right task. Ultimately, from a teacher point of view, I want to know that they've got a place to share that to, so that we can use it for formative and summative assessment. And the workflow there is, whether you're using Google Classroom or just using a Drive file for students to update it to, it's just a couple of clicks away.
And really important to remember is that that power is there. I think interestingly is going back to the students and the creativity. It's about being able for them to be able to show their learning. And I think one of the things that we've seen specifically with Google Classroom has been importantly that students know where to go and get their work, because that's where teachers have put it, and that's where they hand it back, so teachers can then deliver the I guess the assessment piece or the feedback, and actually as a class it can still continue. In terms of the some of the features that are built into iPad specifically, I know that the G Suite apps now support the split screen feature, Matt. So I don't know whether you've got anything that you want to demonstrate on that specifically with the split screen feature.
Yeah, so just looking at, so let's imagine I'm creating a document here, and it's going to be on, not classifying triangles, but it's going to be on maybe stop motion. So I can build obviously quite quickly within these apps. Now, the thing that I suppose if I was doing this on a PC or doing this on a Chromebook, you might argue, well, the app itself has more functionality, but actually, if you look beyond the functionality of the app itself and you look at the functionality of the device, if I go to split screen and I just drag and drop up here, I've now got Safari open. I've done a search for some stop motion images. I want to use that imagery within my my lesson plan or whatever it might be. And actually now I can just drag and drop, and actually within, just a couple of drags of those things across, I'm instantly building. So I'm taking that Google Slides, if that's the way you create, but I'm utilizing the power of the device to be able to just, have this search open on this side, even to the point of it might just be the web link that I want. I can just drag that down here. I know that I've got that then in as a web link I might use. So it's a really, really kind of simple process to move from one side of your screen to the other side of the screen. And that workflow just supports me in the classroom and in planning, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I think there's even there at the top where you got the plus sign, you can just even bring in a picture using the iPad into that slide deck, or if you want to use annotation, you can do that as well. An interesting one actually that you and I were talking about just before we came on was about the I guess some of the differences around Chromebook, even if they're touchscreen, is that they obviously have a keyboard, and there's a big thing around whether students need to have the touch typing skills that were being sought after just from a framework, or an Ofsted framework specifically, a few years ago. And I think the world is changing slightly, but the use of digital linking has certainly gone up, and that's accessible in the G Suite apps. But what about the use of maybe sort of built-in Siri into a document that's using G Suite, for example?
I think you're right. I mean, we talk about like touch typing as if it's something that we feel all young students are going to need to use, and I think with as being a dad of, well, both of us dads of 11-year-olds, we see actually how they engage with things in a different way. What they need to be able to do, and this is where we think about how do we change learning and teaching. What is it the outcome is? We need students to be able to communicate, and at times they need to be able to communicate via written text. But the term written has kind of changed. Yes, it needs to be text on a screen. How it gets onto the screen, though, has changed. We were talking before just about potential updates coming to iPad OS later this year, and the scribble function, which turns my text turns my writing into text, but also, like you said, being able to just add in a text by just using my voice. So if I just take my iPad off my keyboard for a second and just tap in that box, you'll see that to the left hand side of my spacebar is a microphone. If I tap on there, I can just talk and it will type the text onto the screen for me. Mm-hmm. Full stop, new line. So it really does kind of give you that alternative access point for learners across all apps. This works in Google Slides, it's going to work in Docs, it's going to work in Sheets, it's going to work on anything on the device, and that's built in. So that now means for any learner, there is no excuse to not get that wealth of information in their head down on a document, if that is what your learning intention is for that student. Whereas beforehand, maybe typing was a barrier. I've seen many students, in fact Max is one of them, I've asked him to type something, it's all one index finger and tapping away, and it's you can imagine the frustration because they want to get the information down but they can't. I mentioned this to a school I was working with a couple of weeks ago, and I said, look, would you buy a keyboard based device for a child in your early years classrooms, nursery and reception? They'd say no, because they can't type. I say, okay, well, what about the students that can't type as they get older? Why do you take away the functionality of allowing them to do it in multiple ways? So I think as we kind of go through this period of coronavirus, we are reevaluating what it is we're actually asking our students to produce.
And I think it's important. My son he's got fantastically horrible writing, but he's a boy, and actually we were talking about this again earlier on, is when you ask him to create or have a creative story based on a picture that he's seen, for example, if he's verbally discussing it or he's creating some context that is recorded, then actually the story is pretty incredible. But when you ask him to write it, there's no incentive. He's got no desire to really get involved in that. And he can write, he's very good at spelling and everything else. He just doesn't get engaged. And I think that's what we're also seeing, is that we can then tap into every student, because we can see that they that they have the knowledge of the learning. Interesting. We've got a question, Matt, so you'll be an expert in this. Can I use Apple Pencil to annotate on slides?
So no, as you can't in the basic form of this, but depends on what you're trying to achieve. So let's imagine that this is a student's piece of work. So what I would actually do is I would take a screenshot of that piece of work, and then it would bring up the markup options on the left-hand side, which now allows me to annotate directly over it. So if you're looking at it as a point of view of saying, marking someone's work, then yes, you can. It changes the workflow slightly in terms of how do I get that back to the student. But again, I've got my share icon at the top. If the student is in the class with me, I could airdrop it back to them. If they're not, I can just send it back to them through Classroom as a marked piece of work. So there are ways to kind of go around that process of not being able to annotate directly onto the slides in the first place, but it certainly doesn't slow you down in terms of a marking and feedback point of view.
And I know that some Chromebooks absolutely have the touchscreen feature, and there are some tools that allow you to do digital linking. I think the reality is that what we've seen certainly over the last few months is both from Microsoft and from Google, there's been a huge amount of updates around their apps, specifically because they know that the success to their platforms is around the ecosystem rather than particularly just devices. And so they are continuously updating. So needless to say, there probably will be something that comes where that will be allowed. But I think it's important to highlight, as Danielle has said there, you're very welcome. No need to thank us. It's very much sometimes it's about thinking differently. And I know it's a bit of a cliche, but if we always do things the way we've always done them, then we're always going to get the same thing. And so sometimes the mindset that needs to change alongside the workflow is the important bit. And I use my iPad Pro 100% of the time. Everything I do is in the cloud, and people ask me how I create presentations using my iPad. It's just a habit, and I know how to do it, and it works really well, and I can do it from all of the platforms. So if we're doing stuff for Google specifically and I have to use slides, because obviously why wouldn't I, then I absolutely build it in slides. There's some great stuff built into slides, like closed captions, for example, which are hugely powerful. And especially, and I think it's one of the things that we talk about, isn't it, is if I need to stream my G Suite tools onto a big screen, well, you can do it on a Chromebook through Chromecast. iPad, you've got AirPlay, and so you could still be using your iPad as a whiteboard to your big screen and be using the G Suite apps. So there's no need to convert things. There's nothing needs to change it into something that might not work onto a different device. It just has the ability to do that. So really important one to highlight. But again, Danielle, you talked about this, or asked about the Apple Pencil piece and the feedback. Again, being able to download or upload that, into Google Classroom, and students can see that initial very quick feedback. It has huge amounts of power, more so than we've seen traditionally.
If I add to that as well, Tom, I think once you consider what you can do, so showing that kind of simple workflow of dragging up from the bottom left corner, being able to just instantly mark up on that device. Once you start to do that here because you've learned a new workaround, what you actually then start to explore is, well, actually, where else can I use that feature? So if I just go into this Wikipedia page here, irrelevant what it's on, if I do the same thing, yes, I can take a screenshot, but actually I can also annotate the full document. And this then is, you've gone from one thing to learn something new. I can now annotate the whole document and keep scrolling through it. And this is a really, really useful thing for students to be able to do as they kind of do their research online, maybe. And when they're done with that, again, I can email that. I can send that to Google Classroom, save it to my drive.
Before you do that,
and
though,
it gives me an alternative. Yeah, go on.
So just to add to, just while you're just there, before you go to share it, is I think what's important there in that screenshot is that obviously you can take the screenshot of the immediate screen that you see, or you have the option as you've got there to highlight or to showcase the whole page. So that's really important. And you're right, is then the share feature is I guess the next gem is that you have the ability to then make use of that in lots of other apps and AirDrop and so on, to go down that road. Or save to files. You can use files to go to save to your drive as well. Just something that came in my mind while you were doing that, Matt, as well as around the ability to do the annotation piece. We talked about the split screen feature, and you can dive between various apps and so on. You can have two Google Docs open together side by side, and they work very, very well that way as well. In terms of the going back to the typing skills, I guess the one comment that I get quite often is actually on a Chromebook. A user logs in and out. On an iPad, you don't necessarily have that feature. Just to make your people aware, if they don't know, is you can set up what we call shared iPads. And so one of the concerns that are raised often is if a student's used Google Drive on an iPad and they can't officially sign out, if you like, unless they physically sign out, and another student picks it up, they're in that other person's drive. It can work very much so where you can have shared iPads and students can essentially, in a virtual world, kind of log in and log out of an iPad, and all their content is cached so it can be downloaded. So just be aware of that, because it's one of those things that gets often asked, as that's one of the differences. And I guess the other thing is to talk about is, Chromebooks are cheaper, therefore they're better than iPads. I think, again, what we're trying to address here is the workflow piece, and that is about working in the cloud. And the great thing about the G Suite apps is that they're platform agnostic, so they can work on any device. And we're seeing a huge uplift in the way that, or the uptake, I should say, around using G Suite with devices such as the iPad. I don't know if there's anything else in terms of the myths or anything else that you wanted to showcase on the G Suite apps, Matt, specifically.
I think one of the myths was the Chromebook thing. I think you kind of mentioned it then, the Chromebook versus iPad. And I hear the kind of retort quite often that an iPad is a Chromebook. And as much as I don't like the phrasing as such, because an iPad is an iPad and a Chromebook is a Chromebook, the thought that goes behind it is fundamentally that the things that you like about the Chromebook, which often come up, which are that instant on, the access to my tools in one place, that is fundamentally what you get with the iPad experience. The long battery life, people talk about those things, but we did say this before. It's about what works for you as an educator based on what your teaching and learning outcomes are trying to be. Now, I know that as a PE teacher, I was mobile. I'm not in a classroom, and as portable as a Chromebook is, it's not mobile. Because I still have to be sat down whilst I'm using it. Whereas actually with my iPad as a PE teacher, and this is just one example, I can move around. I can film the students as they're performing and let them then watch themselves back, or equally the students use that themselves. And yes, there are potentially ways that you can do that as well with a Chromebook, buying different versions of a Chromebook with detachable and reversible webcams and stuff. But really, that decision needs to come down to, as we've shown you here, you can do all of the Google stuff on an iPad. So actually, now, what device am I buying, and what is it going to do in the classroom to change what learning and teaching can look like? And so when you then explore, well, actually, now my students can go and be creative with the device because they have a choice. They can, if we look at the Apple kind of applications, they've got creation of music. They've got the musical instruments, do GarageBand, we can do podcasts, we can do all of those other things, even down to like augmented reality and reality composer. Is that something that we're looking at from a learning and teaching point of view to move things forward, or are we fixed on it being because we need the keyboard? And so it's really a discussion that you want to be having now, whether it's Google or Microsoft. I think that's a discussion. What is it that we want learning and teaching to look like as we move forward and try to meet the needs of our learners?
Absolutely. I haven't got anything else to add to that, really. It's absolutely true. No, well, it's true, isn't it? And I think it's not about a personal decision. It's really about the outcomes for the students, and the teaching learning always is a huge measurement of success for institutions. So I guess from that perspective right now, I guess it's really about dumping your screen, Matt. Maybe we'll come back on camera, and I will then be able to continue with the slide deck. So we're just going to come back on. Bear with me 2 seconds. So where are we? So live demo, and so big thank you. But I guess any questions whilst we're here, and I will say whilst we're seeing if there are any questions. A huge thank you, Matt, again for your time today. It's great to be able to share some of this stuff with our listeners. I guess the next step for us really is about talking to those customers who are interested in potentially using G Suite, specifically on iPad, but G Suite as overall as well, absolutely. And then around the support that we can offer through the Apple Professional Learning Program, which is hugely important as well. Because it allows capacity for staff to be able to use the devices from a teaching and learning perspective. I mean, it looks like there are no other questions actually, Matt. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
Just really, like we said, just consider at this point where there's that, I suppose, a little bit of downtime now over the summer, like what that learning intention is at most times. And like we said, if it isn't to create a spreadsheet or create a document, and even if it is create those things, like there are multiple tools that enable you to do that. And sometimes if you go down a path that hasn't been fully thought through in terms of the possibilities, you can hamper the learning for lots of students. And not to talk too much about my son, because I'm sure he gets bored of hearing me talk about him all the time.
A lot of airtime, your son.
He does get a lot of airtime.
Does he write jingles, by the way, for
he doesn't do jingles, no. Over the last few months, I think what he's found is that his approach to learning in a slightly different way that he didn't get to do in school because of whatever reasons. And that's not to say anything negative about the school at all, but he's had a bit of freedom at home to do it in a different way. He's had access to different tools to do things in a different way. And he's seen that now. He's seen a creative way that he can learn and enjoy and engage, even if it has been at a distance, which has been a shame. But that's the thing for him. And he's learned those skills to be able to do things that he amazes me at. Some of the things I see him doing now. But he engages. He'll sit there for 2 hours and do something creative. Which is also maths, which is the area that he doesn't find as interesting. So,
and yeah, absolutely. And in all positiveness about him getting airtime, it's because he's doing some of this great stuff, and you've got a great series of videos that you guys have done. And I guess also from our perspective, we are building a pretty impressive video library that will be accessible for customers should they want it, around the use of G Suite apps, specifically on iPad. There's also 365 apps as well. And so, Matt, again, thank you. Karis, thank you in the background for doing everything you have done. And thank you for everyone for being with us this afternoon. We are going to shut our cameras down and shut the microphones down unless anyone has any live questions they want to ask. If not, the chat will be open for about another 30 seconds. And we bid you a great afternoon, and thank you again for joining us. If you feel that this has been of value, by the way, and you want to share this with colleagues, we are going to be doing a few more of these during the summer holidays, so people can sit there with a gin and tonic, some bottles of beer or wine or whatever, and we will carry on as normal. So thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
And speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.